Hello, this is a concept I learnt about in neuro-linguistic programming. The idea is that this is our brain here, our head, and what happens is we've got far too much information coming in that we can process far too much. So what happens is we have short circuits, shortcuts. So what we do is we have sort of predetermined what are called meta programs, which process the information in certain ways and produce certain results. And if we're aware of it, then that means a lot. So first of all, it means we can actually change some of our meta programs if we're aware of how we're thinking. And secondly, it means that we can communicate better with others. And that's really important in business, management, negotiation, sales, it's very important. So the way it works is the information comes in mainly through our senses. So visually, auditory, touch, kinesthetic, smell, taste, etc. We're swamped. We can't process anything like the amount of information that comes in. So a lot of it we deal with automatically. And the stuff that we do think about, we think about it in sort of shortened ways, if you like. So for example, you have people who move away compared to people who move towards. So these people, the ones who move away are motivated mainly by fear of loss, I suppose, whereas the ones who move towards, they're thinking of gain and pleasure. So again, if you're selling to someone and you know that they're motivated by fear, you might trade on the fact that if they don't do something, they'll be losing out. Whereas if you know they're motivated by gain, you would actually sell the benefits and the pleasure of whatever it is you're selling. External versus internal. What that means is external frame of reference means that you're motivated by what other people think and you'll feel rewarded by praise, etc., that you get from other people. Whereas internal means that you're sort of self-driven and you don't really care that much what other people think. You only care about what you know is right. Now, obviously, that has massive implications in terms of what sort of jobs people do, but also in terms of, how you reward team members, etc. Self versus others is a similar sort of idea. Self frame of reference means that you're mainly interested about how something's going to affect you. Whereas others might mean that you're more interested in how things are going to affect other people. So these might be sort of more, altruistic type roles, health workers, etc., compared to maybe business people. That's a bit simplistic, to be honest, but you can see where I'm getting at, that if you're more worried about how things affect you, you're going to think differently than if you're more interested in how things affect other people. Match versus mismatch. Now, what that means is that people who like to match, they think they like things to stay the same and to be the same, and they'll go along with consensus. And that's 2/3 of people. But a third of people, they have a mismatch frame of reference, and what that means is that they look for differences and they look for things that don't make sense and they go against consensus. So these are the sort of argumentative, nitpicky types, and the people who question the way it's always been done. Obviously, very important to have both in any team. This one's really good, convincing strategies. Now, the way that works is, first of all, people are convinced differently. So some people are more likely to be convinced visually or auditorily or through doing something kinesthetically. People use all three, but they'll predominate in one normally. But the other thing is, how often do they need to have something happen for them to be convinced? So you get one-time convincers. They're really easy to sell to because if you convince them once, they'll buy forevermore. You get sometime convincers, so they might need convincing 2 or 3 times and then they'll buy forevermore. You get ones who need a lot more than that, but you also get ones who are called, I think it's called consistent, which basically means that every time you want to speak to them, they need reconvincing. So they're much harder work, if you like, to sell to and to convince consistently than the one-time convinced. So that's really important in sales. And, car salespeople, for instance, they're trained in that sort of area, or some of them are. Necessary versus possible. Now, the way that works is if something needs doing, someone who's got a necessary meta program will just get on with it. Whereas the person who's got the possible frame will think, is there some way of doing this better? What else could we do? How could we improve this? Obviously, again, in a team environment, you need people who get on with the work, but you also need people who question it and think of new ideas, new ways of doing things. Big picture versus small picture. This is a favourite one of mine. I've read, and I think this is true, a lot of the education system in a lot of countries is based around the idea of starting from first principles and then building up. So start with like experiments in the laboratory or basic vocabulary and languages and then build up. And that's great for small picture people who like detail. And then once they've got the detail, they can widen that out into broader theories. But big picture people, of whom I'm one, they prefer to see the overall scheme of things and how it all fits together and the overall theory. And then they'll worry about, the small implications of it. So, for example, when I was at school, I used to get really impatient doing experiments in science because all I wanted to do was, rather than setting up all these tubes and, clips and things, I just wanted to be told what the principle is that we're proving and how it could be proved, and this is how you do it, and that would be enough for me. I wouldn't need to set all these tubes up and all that. It just make me very impatient. So big picture people want the big picture and they get impatient with the detail, whereas small picture people want the detail and how it all hangs together first before they'll accept the big picture. So you can see here, it's, big conflict. And also this one's starters versus the completers. Starters like to start something and then they want to move on and start something else. Whereas completers, what they want to do is they want to dot the I's and cross the T's and make sure everything is working thoroughly rather than be constantly worrying to start something new. So again, you can see in business and in teams, etc., it's important to have people who start and then start something else. But it's also important to have people who complete it. So I suppose these are similar to the big picture versus small picture ideas. It's a fascinating area. And the whole point is, by asking the right sort of questions, you can actually work out what sort of meta programs people have, and then you can talk to them or communicate with them in a way that makes more sense to them and that's more likely to motivate them to actually, agree with you or do whatever it is you're proposing. Very interesting area altogether. If you're interested in how a mastermind group might help you explore some of these ideas and take your business forward, etc., have a look at businessroundtableuk.co.uk. So there you go. Meta programs. Hope you found that interesting. Thanks very much for watching.